Hi everybody and welcome to Heel Heat. This is a Heel Heat Top 10 show. My name is George Coles. This is my tag team partner, Brian Kendrick.
Oh, my name was Sean Trainham. Gary Rhodes, everybody.
And our topic for the top 10 this week is this show is top 10 wrestlers of the 1990s. And I'll go ahead and let you start off, Gary.
We're going to start off and we're going to catch a lot of slack and a lot of shit over this one. But it's not his skill, it was in a booking. Number 10 is going to be Ric Flair.
And the reason, like you touched on a little bit, that he goes so low on our list is WCW pretty much used him as an enhancement to the Stars by the middle of the 90s and all the way throughout until the end of the 90s.
Well, they bring Hogan in 94, and Hogan's first match, Flair jobs to him. That was a big mistake on their part, I think. I think Flair should have went over. Yeah. Fans were expecting Hogan to go over, so it would have been a little big swerve. And the thing is, this has been your company's face for how many years, and you shit on him as soon as Hogan comes in. Exactly. That was my problem with it. Mr. New York comes in there, you have him job the first match, and then Hogan wins the second match. At least have Flair cheat to win.
Cheating to win.
Yeah.
And that's a problem, and it's a problem that's also going to plague our number 9 guy, the Macho Man Randy Savage, who in the beginning, and that's number 9, in the beginning of the decade, Vince had him working as a commentator. He wasn't even wrestling. And by the time he came to WCW, he kind of always, WCW booked him as a second fiddle to Hulk Hogan the whole time he was there, either face or heel, because when he turned and went NWO, Savage was putting on the better matches, but he wasn't getting nowhere near the top of the card. I mean, they did give him some world title runs, but nothing great.
His career didn't have a spotlight to it in there, except for that match with DDP, I would say.
Oh, the Halloween Havoc match? I mean, Savage, he's one of the greatest wrestlers of all time, just like Ric Flair is, but they used him so poorly that it puts it so far down our list. And that's the thing, they never let him get any bigger than Hogan. When Hogan was fighting the Dungeon of Doom, Savage was at his side. When Hogan was in the NWO, Savage was at his side. I mean, it was ridiculous how they pushed him there as basically a Hogan flunky.
And and even Vince did it back in the day, though.
Yeah.
Except for their big battle at WrestleMania 5,
where Hogan went over.
He's always been second fiddle to Hogan, and the guy, if he was in Hogan's shoes, for Hulkamania, I think it would have been even bigger yet. Just because Savage was a better talker, he can go over to the common man, the common wrestling fan.
He's just a common man,
if you will. But he was just that good,
I mean, he was good, and he's a guy that's probably on our top 10 list of all time, but...
Now, number 8 is The Undertaker.
The Undertaker?
You gonna go 1-on-1 with The Undertaker. Anyways, Taker to me, the reason he's so low on the list now is because he didn't really kick in. I mean, he was around through the whole 90s, but he didn't really kick in until 90s. Well, I mean, he had a few good matches with Yokozuna. But until Mick Foley came around as Mankind, that's when I started seeing his skill even more.
Well, the thing of it was, Undertaker was used in a lot of squash matches, and if you look back from about 90, or when he started, the guys he would wrestle, El Gigante, Kama Mustafa. I mean, these guys, King Kong Bundy on like his 4th or 5th return.
Exactly.
He wrestled the fake Undertaker. I mean, they didn't even put the guy in the main events. He was kind of a mid-card attraction. And for so long, his work rate consisted of take everybody's move and no-sell them, so it kind of... And something that also turned me off is in the early 90s WWF, you had some really great talent there, but they were way too cartoony and way too gimmicky, and Undertaker was the flagship for the cartoon and gimmicks.
He was.
I mean, he had the urn that you would open the top and a spotlight would shoot out. And
you had him, and then you had Doink the Clown on the other half.
Yeah. And I mean, both of the guys, Matt Bourne and Mark Ellis, are both great workers, but the way that they were pushed, Matt Bourne doesn't even get on this list, but it puts Undertaker at number 8 on our list.
Exactly.
Longevity-wise, he's probably one of the greatest of all time, but just the way he was pushed in the beginning of the decade. By the end of the decade, they really got a hold on what his character should be and made it more of what it should be. And since then, I think since about 96, like you said, till about now, I think he's been absolutely on fire.
Oh, yeah.
And speaking of fire, the guy that can light a fire under anybody, our number 7 guy was Yokozuna. Probably one of the greatest super heavyweights of all time. A guy that can move and fly around the ring like he was X-Pac. I mean...
Well, the thing is, he caught everybody off guard. Because before him, you had guys like Haystacks Calhoun that, just stand there and you have to come and attack him. This guy came to you, and he came to you, he made every match, or every move he look, or it made every move he hit look like it hurt that guy 10 times.
Oh, yeah. Probably the best leg drop in the history of the business.
Oh, yeah. Shoot, indeed. But he never hurt nobody. I've never heard of anybody ever saying that Yokozuna ever hurt him. And he did some of the most dangerous-looking moves. The bonsai drop.
Yeah.
And that's just how great he was. He was one of the best workers they ever had as a super heavyweight.
For a 600-pound guy, the stuff that Yokozuna was doing was absolutely off the books, off the charts, amazing. He was as good as anybody in the decade was. Sadly, by the end of the decade, some health issues had run amok, and he ended up passing away. I think, what was it, 2000 that he passed away?
Yeah. Honestly, in your opinion, do you ever think we're going to have a giant super heavyweight that moves like that again in your lifetime?
I don't think there's ever been another human that's moved like that with that size. Other than actual sumo wrestlers, who even some of them didn't have the movement that Yoko did. But the guy was a one in a million type talent.
Now, speaking of 1 in a million, his cousin comes in at number 6, The Rock. One of the best talkers in the business.
For the millions?
And millions. And dozens. And this guy here, he came in, came in with a shit gimmick, Rocky Maivia, and got tired of it. Fans are saying, die, Rocky, die. So he turns his real-life anger towards the fans, turns it up tenfold, and becomes one of the biggest heels of all time.
And also one of the biggest faces of all time. One of the biggest draws in the history of wrestling. Another guy, that just absolutely shot to the top of the card, and his charisma came through the screen and drew you into everything he did. Once The Rock became himself, The Rock there was no limit to how high he could go. And the only reason he's so low on our list is because his career kind of straddles 2 decades. He's only halfway in the 90s and only halfway in the 2000s. Because not even halfway, only 2 years into the 2000s.
Well, and then really he's not even halfway in the 90s. He debuted in 96, but he was stagnant. He didn't get big until 97, 98 when the Nation of Domination, as soon as he turned heel. And then turned into The Rock.
Yeah.
Or the People's Champ.
And The Rock, he's a guy, if he would have stayed around when he left the business would have been in a lot better shape than it is now. I'm not blaming it on him at all.
You got some life to live,
If you can make $20 million to do a movie, by all means, go do that. Because you're not making $20 million a year in wrestling.
No.
And not blaming any of that on The Rock, but The Rock was a guy that can draw in the casual fans, and that's really his strength. One of his main strengths is the average Joe would know who The Rock was even before he did in movies, where most of these guys on the list, you go up to an average person on the street, they have no idea who they are.
Exactly.
And speaking of a guy that looked kind of average, The Rock's sometimes tag partner, sometimes opponent, Mick Foley, is in at number 5. Whether it be Mankind, Cactus Jack, or Dude Love, the 3 faces of Foley, he wrestled each a little bit differently. He was a focal point in the 3 biggest companies in the world at the time, in ECW, WCW, and WWF. WCW kind of shit on his career, even so much so as they talk shit about him when he finally won the WWF World Championship. But if you look back, he had one of the best WCW matches of all time, him versus Sting.
Vader wasn't bad either, where he lost his ear,
Well, yeah. The one in Germany or one of the ones...
Well, actually, the one after the stateside, I'm sorry, after he lost his ear. No, the thing I liked about Mick is he gets you so emotionally involved. If you're out to hate him, he makes sure you hate him. But when you feel so sorry for him when he's getting beat down, Like take the match where he had to defend the tag team titles against the New Age Outlaws himself. You know, they beat the shit out of him. You're like, damn, dude. But he took it with a smile on his face.
The guy absolutely knew his limitations, and he played to them. He's one of the guys that made hardcore wrestling as big as it was. He's one of the guys that changed the style in basically 3 different companies. I mean, every company he went to, he left a fingerprint and an impact on. He was a guy, when he won the World Championship, it was such a big event that when WCW tried to ruin it for everybody, it literally made their fans go watch it because everybody wanted Mick Foley to succeed. If you loved him, hated him, every wrestling fan in the world wanted Mick Foley to succeed.
Well, you take a list of guys he made. I mean, Taker was around before, but like we said, he made the Taker. The Rock, he made The Rock. Hunter Hearst Helmsley, he made Hunter. In Austin's first big pay-per-view opponent after winning the WWE title, exactly, a couple times.
Yeah. And he's a guy. He's kind of a caretaker. You know, you could put him out there with anybody, and you might not get a 5-star classic match by Dave Meltzer's opinion, but you would get a match that the fans would talk about for years and years.
Now, talking about a superstar that can bring, that can just make a great match. Our number 4, Bret the Hitman Hart.
Is there a reason you're doing that?
That's why I was doing it. I was doing it like that. Anyways, Bret was one of the greatest technicians of all time.
And also one of the best faces of all time.
Exactly, but arguably maybe the best technician of all time, in a lot of people's opinion. Second best sharpshooter. First goes to Owen. I gotta say it like that. Owen sold it so well. Bret put it on so well. You get what I'm saying?
Yeah, I got you.
And like you said, he was one of the biggest baby faces of all time. What was before Attitude Era? What was it called?
The New Generation.
He was the leader of the New Generation. When Hogan left, everything was handed over to Bret.
And he was a great ambassador for the WWF at the time. It was a real down period. You were coming off the Vince McMahon steroid trial. Hulk Hogan left. A lot of your stars were leaving. Savage, the Nasty Boys. I mean, just the guys that built the WWF were leaving and going for more money to WCW. And Bret was one of the guys that stayed for the longest time and helped carry the WWF through the darker times, through the cartoon era. There was, and basically the beginning of before the New Generation really took on. There was so much I hated about wrestling, but I could always turn it on and know that if I seen Bret Hart, I was going to get a great match on that show. Whether he was wrestling Hakushi, whether he was wrestling 1-2-3 Kid, Sparkplug Holly, all these terrible gimmicks.
Well, one of the best matches I've ever seen him in, it was a Superstars match, was him versus Skinner.
Exactly.
And I mean, honestly, if you ever get a chance to look it up on YouTube, check it out. That was a classic match.
And Steve Keirn.
Yeah, I'm trying to get
Steve Keirn, hell of a wrestler. That's part of what was wrong with the WWF at the time. They had gimmicks like the Goon, Skinner, Duke the Dumpster Droese. I mean, just terrible, terrible gimmicks. And they would put him on these great wrestlers. Steve Keirn's a hell of a wrestler.
Hell of a trainer.
Hell of a trainer. I mean, Doink the Clown, Matt Bourne is a tremendous, tremendous wrestler. But they gave him such shitty gimmicks. And Bret Hart's someone they didn't. And he actually, guys like him and Yokozuna were reasons why I would even watch it in the early 90s.
Oh, exactly.
And he stayed around. He was a huge impact. Probably the biggest angle, which really wasn't an angle, it was a true happening.
The screw job?
The Montreal screw job is mostly known for Bret Hart, which WCW dropped the ball. If they would have brought him in as the main guy after that, they would have killed WWF because everybody wanted to cheer for Bret Hart.
Exactly. The thing is, I think a lot of that had to do with Hogan, because Hogan didn't want to lose a lot of his steam. We're hard on Hogan. But
he deserves it.
His ego is what destroyed my faith in Hulk Hogan.
Exactly.
That being said, Bret Hart was he's great at number 4.
And speaking of a guy that Hulk Hogan probably should have put over but never did cleanly, our number 3 guy is Sting, the face of WCW by far. Other than him and Ric Flair are the 2 faces of the company. Sting was the guy that did not ever leave WCW. He was from WCW from the day it began till the day it ended.
Yeah.
And he carried every single belt they had. He was a really credible world champion. He changed his gimmick from a more surfer style, colorful gimmick, kind of copied the Crow and did the Crow makeup, grew his hair longer, became very interesting part of the show. So much so that they built a match with him and Hogan for a year and a half that the payoff was absolute terrible bullshit. And that's all Hulk Hogan.
Exactly.
And not Sting at all, because Sting is a great worker. He had great matches with everybody on this list almost. Everybody from Ric Flair, Mick Foley, Bret the Hitman Hart had great matches with him. I mean, the guy, there's not much you could say bad about Sting. And he's another guy, he's a quintessential face. And, you know, we like the heels better, and Sting is a guy
we liked our heels going against.
We liked them going against. I mean, and the guy, Big Van Vader versus Sting is some of the best Starrcade matches ever.
Your boy Cactus Jack versus Sting.
Yeah.
You know.
Even Sting versus in the Coal Miner's Glove match against Jake the Snake Roberts, one of Jake the Snake Roberts' greatest matches, and it's against Sting. And his rivalry with Ric Flair is what put him on the map, but he stayed on the map, and he stayed relevant all the way through the decade.
Now, you want to talk about relevant, we're going to talk about number 2. This man came from being a tag team wrestler to being a WWE champion on several occasions. Number 2, the Heartbreak Kid, Shawn Michaels, arguably the best wrestler of all time.
The argument could be made. The greatest in-ring performer of all time.
Greatest talker of all time.
The icon.
The showstopper.
The main eventer. The comb-over.
Now, yeah. You know, I hated seeing the Shawn Michaels of now compared to the Shawn Michaels of then. Even though he could still put on the matches, he just didn't look the same, you know. Back in the day, Shawn Michaels with the DX was awesome.
His religion, and I'm not knocking it at all, it changed him as a person. Part of why you liked Shawn Michaels was he was an asshole. Shawn Michaels, there's no way getting around it. He was an asshole, and he was a bully, basically. I mean, him and the rest of the clique bullied guys around, and his antics on TV were so different from anything that anybody ever seen that it sparked the Attitude Era. So much so that they, on the video game WWE 13, they consider the beginning of the Attitude Era the match where he's a special referee with Bret Hart versus Undertaker.
The Heart and Souls match.
And he hits Undertaker in the head with the chair when he's trying to hit Bret. And that's what kind of begun DX and kind of changed the whole way wrestling looked.
But even before DX, I mean, he was one of the top baby faces there. He also, before him, he was a top heel. He went and he built himself up. You know, he got the Intercontinental title from a Bulldog. He went after that and started challenging for the world title. And then his match at WrestleMania 11 against Kevin Nash was one of the best matches of all time. You know, and he won the Royal Rumble back-to-back.
Exactly. And he was the first guy to go from number 1 to win the Rumble, too, wasn't he?
Exactly. Flair was number 3. He was beforehand. He was the longest guy beforehand.
Yeah. And, I mean, there's not much you could say about HBK that hasn't been said. He's very deserving of our number 2. And speaking of deserving, let's talk about some guys that are deserving to be on this list, but just barely made it. Now, these aren't in any particular order. I'll let you go ahead and start it off, Gary.
Well, we're going to start off
with our best of the rest.
The best of the rest. I'm going to start off with my personal favorite, Mr. Perfect. Just bad timing. That's all we got to say is, you know, when he came in, it was more around the Hogan era. By then he had a hurt back. So
he took about 4 or 5 years off.
So he was working for Ric Flair as his manager.
Yeah. And the next is arguably one of the biggest tag teams of all time, the Legion of Doom, the Road Warriors. Guys that got a pop everywhere they went.
The next guy we have to talk about is Triple H. He just really wasn't a giant part of the 90s, but he was a very solid worker and a very good part of the Attitude Era.
Yeah.
Very big part of it.
Another guy, Shane Douglas, one of the faces of ECW, had a decent run in WWF and in WCW.
We'll talk about WWF. Someone that wrestled for both those organizations, Kevin Nash. was a champion in both. One of the longest reigning WWE champions until CM Punk.
Another guy, WCW champion, Diamond Dallas Page. A guy that went from absolutely nothing to being on the top of the card.
One of my personal favorites from ECW, actually my favorite from ECW, Raven. This guy here, if he didn't have a lot of the skeletons in his closet, he would be number one, I think, just the way he could think through a match.
Speaking of skeletons, our next guy, 123 Kid, aka 6, aka X-Pac. What can you say about the guy? He was a great worker in the ring, and I liked him. I mean, a lot of people talk bad about him, but I liked him a lot.
Well, he was a part of the NWO when it first came out, and he was part of the new DX. Speaking of tag teams that we talked about earlier, Legion of Doom, the second best tag team of all time.
Well, the greatest tag team of all time.
I like messing with them. The Dudley Boys. These guys could get you to hate them from anywhere. Your favorite memory is when the guy was almost jumping out of the whatchamacallit after him.
Exactly. And speaking of guys, and that's our list of the best of the rest, and the top 9, and our number 1's about to be said. If you guys have anyone you think we left off, someone we put in the wrong position, someone needs to go down, move up, let us know, put it in our comments. And I'll go ahead and throw it to you, let you say who number 1 is, because I know you're a huge fan.
What?
Who's number 1, GR?
Austin 316.
Stone Cold Steve Austin. I mean, the guy started off the decade as Stunning Steve Austin. I thought he had a huge impact on WCW. Always got right up against the glass ceiling, and they would not let him break through. And then he went to WWE and became the biggest draw in the history of wrestling.
He blew the doors off that bitch. You know, he is the biggest name in professional wrestling. There's nobody bigger.
Nothing. Not even Hogan. No one could touch him. The guys on this list, everybody else he's so far ahead of everybody as far as a draw that it's ridiculous to even consider anybody else at that spot.
Oh no.
And basically that's all I gotta say about this list. Is there anyone thing else you need to add?
No, I think that's about it.
I'm George Coles.
I'm Gary Rhodes.
And this has been a Heel Heat Top 10.